You've been in the same room as someone worth $14 billion. You just didn't know what that meant yet. Most people think wealth is a number. It's not. It's a system. And depending on where you sit inside that system, whether you married into it, were born into it, or just share a last name with it, your entire experience of reality changes. This is what that actually looks like. Level 1. The distant relative. You share a last name with someone worth $14 billion. You've met him 3 times. Your grandmother's 90th birthday, he arrived by helicopter, left before the cake. A cousin's bar mitzvah, he shook your hand, forgot your name in 30 seconds. And that one Christmas where you parked in his spot and spent 20 minutes apologizing to a man whose annual security budget is larger than your salary. That's the entire relationship. You're a project manager at a mid-sized consulting firm, leased Toyota, underwater. Suburb where last year's big event was a new mailbox, and then a TikTok goes viral. Someone maps your family tree to his name. Overnight, your life changes. Not because you got richer, because everyone thinks you did. The DMs flood in. Crypto scammers, old college friends who never once texted you in a decade, suddenly in your inbox like your old friends. Every message starts the same way. Hey, saw you're related to, and ends with something you cannot do for them. But here's the part nobody talks about. Every December, $15,000 appears in your bank account. Wire transfer. Memo says one word: family. No call, no explanation. It pays off your credit cards, funds the vacation you couldn't have taken otherwise. It changes your entire year. To him, it's a rounding error. Someone on his team processed it without telling him. You never say thank you because you don't know how. He never asks because he doesn't remember sending it. That's what it means to be adjacent to that kind of money. Close enough to feel the warmth, far enough that nobody on the inside ever thinks about you at all. Level 2, the in-law. You married into it 3 years ago, and the first thing they did was invite you to their small house in the Hamptons. 12 bedrooms, sommelier on retainer, staff that already knew your coffee order before you introduced yourself. You thought it was extraordinary. You didn't yet understand this was the casual version. The wedding had security consultants, a publicist whose entire job was managing which paparazzi got access, a seating chart reviewed, seriously, for geopolitical implications. Your bachelor party cost your future brother-in-law $50,000 in a single night. Your friends spent the whole weekend taking photos. They knew instinctively they'd never be back. Now you live inside it. No limit credit card. Tesla as a welcome gift. Penthouse owned by a trust. But watch what happens the moment a real conversation starts. Family meetings happen without you. Business discussions stop when you walk in. There is a group chat you are not in. The prenup you signed contains a morality clause, social media provisions, and an NDA covering situations you haven't even encountered yet. You're not a member of the family. You're a trusted addition. The difference is felt most clearly in the rooms you're never invited into. You have access to everything money can buy. You have access to nothing it actually controls. And the longer you live inside it, the more precisely you understand what that means. Level 3. The sibling. Same house, same parents, same dinner table growing up. He built something worth $22 billion. You built a sustainable fashion company, genuinely profitable, 200 employees, 10 years of real sacrifice to get there. You are worth $10 million, richer than 99.9% of the planet, and at every single family dinner, you are the unsuccessful one. Every article written about your company mentions him in the first sentence. Every investor meeting has that moment. You can feel it arriving, where someone asks, carefully, whether the family is involved. Every award you receive gets attributed somewhere to his name, not your work, his name. He offers to buy your company every few years, always casual about it, like he's suggesting you grab lunch, double what anyone else would pay, and accepting would mean admitting, publicly and permanently, that you needed him. You've said no 3 times. His kids and yours go to the same school. His arrive by helicopter, yours take the Tesla. Objectively, a small difference, but you've watched the other parents turn their heads when that helicopter lands, and it never feels small. Here's what nobody tells you about being the sibling of a billionaire. Your success is real. Your work is real. Everything you built is real. It just will never, ever be the first thing anyone says about you. Level 4. The family friend prep school together. Harvard roommates. You were best man at his wedding when he was just a trust fund kid with a pitch deck and an irritating amount of self-belief. You told him the startup was too risky, advised him to consider law school. He named a conference room after you in his first office building, a monument to your terrible advice that journalists photograph every time they write about his origin story. You get invited to everything. The galas, the private island, Super Bowl suite, New Year's in Aspen, every year without fail. You are always in the room. You are consulted on nothing. Once, you suggested he look at a mutual friend's restaurant chain as an investment. His assistant scheduled a formal pitch meeting. You sat across from a junior associate with a slide deck template and a polite smile, and you pitched it like someone who had cold called the office. Because in that room, that's exactly what you were. And then there's dinner. He always picks up the tab because the amount means nothing to him, which means you never get to return the favor, which means the generosity only ever flows one direction, which means gratitude becomes complicated, which means you carry something in your chest you genuinely don't have a clean name for. The friendship is real. You know it's real, but it stopped being equal somewhere around year 15. You just stopped pretending otherwise. Level 5. The child. You are 17 years old, and your biggest problem is that thousands of strangers on the internet have decided they hate you because of your birthday party. Someone leaked photos, the custom watch, the performance. There's an NDA, so you can't even say the name. The comments were brutal, in the specific way that only the internet can be brutal. Your therapist, who specializes in high net worth family dynamics and charges accordingly, says this is normal for your situation. Think about that. There is a therapist's specialty for this, and you need one at 17. You go to a school that costs more than most people's houses, but everyone at your school goes to the same school, so it feels completely normal, until you step outside and realize your version of normal and everyone else's aren't even the same country. Your college applications were managed by consultants. Your nonprofit was launched through the family foundation. Your internship was at a portfolio company. On paper, you look extraordinary. The thing you carry quietly, the thing nobody ever actually talks about, is that you will never really know how much of it was you. You can't date without security vetting the other person first. Your last relationship ended when she sold photos of the vacation house to a tabloid. You were 15 years old. You learned what betrayal looks like before you learned how to drive. You didn't choose this life. You were born into it, and you will spend the rest of your life either running from what it means or learning to carry it. Neither option is simple. Neither one is free. Level 6. The spouse. You met him at a charity auction 15 years ago when he was worth only $500 million. You were a successful attorney. You thought you understood wealth. You didn't. The gap between rich and billionaire rich is not a difference in degree, it is a different category of reality, like the difference between a swimming pool and the ocean. One you can see the edges of, the other has none. The honeymoon was on a private island he purchased for the occasion, then donated to conservation afterward because keeping it felt excessive. The flowers alone cost more than most people's entire weddings. At the time you thought that was remarkable. Now it's just how things are done. You run a foundation, $100 million out the door every year, under your direction. Your staff includes people with security clearances. When you travel, an advanced team goes ahead because your arrival has logistical implications for wherever you land. People look at that and assume your life is easy. They don't see what happens between the photographs. Every public appearance signals something about your family's values, whether you intend it to or not. Every outfit becomes a statement on wealth inequality. Every charity you support gets examined for political implications. And when he says something that lands wrong, you are the one making the calls. To donors, to other families, to the people whose goodwill is not optional. You chose this. You chose him. That part is true and it matters. But some mornings before the staff arrives and the calendar fills and the world starts requiring things from you, you sit in a room that costs more than some countries' annual budgets, and you feel the full weight of belonging to something so much larger than yourself. That weight doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger, or you don't. Level 7. The active family member. 29 years old. You manage $2 billion. Stanford MBA. 2 years at Goldman Sachs, specifically, deliberately, so that no one could ever say you hadn't earned your position. You're up at 5 for calls with Asia, reading pitch decks at midnight. You work harder than most people in this industry, because you have to. Every investment that fails gets blamed on nepotism. Every deal you pass on that later succeeds becomes a story about how you don't have your father's instincts. Good outcomes belong to your last name. Bad outcomes belong to you personally. That is the accounting system you operate inside. It does not balance. It never balances. Founders pitch you assuming the last name is the real meeting. It isn't. You pass on bad deals. You fund companies that fail. You make real calls with real consequences. Except when you get it wrong, the headline includes your father's name. You are building a track record inside a story that was already written before you arrived. The question, and you won't have the answer for another decade, is whether that track record eventually becomes louder than the story. You hope so. You work like it will. Some nights, you're genuinely not sure. Level 8, the successor, 35 years old. Everyone already knows what you're being prepared for, including you. You are not running a business, you are stewarding a legacy, and those are not the same thing. Running a business means your decisions affect your outcomes. Stewarding a legacy means your decisions affect hundreds of thousands of people, generations of family expectation, and a public narrative that has been compounding since before you were born. Your father built this from nothing. That sentence follows you into every room. When you innovate, the question is whether it honors what he built. When you restructure, the question is whether you're dismantling it. When you succeed, it's because of what he built. There is no version of this role where you are simply evaluated on your own terms. You work a 100-hour week. You haven't taken a real vacation in 4 years. Your marriage survived, barely, through deliberate work because your spouse understood what they were entering. Your children see you on weekends when you're not traveling, and they're already beginning to carry it. That quiet understanding that the name they were born with doesn't belong only to them. You accepted this role because you believed you were the right person for it. That belief hasn't changed, but belief and certainty are different things. In those hours between midnight and 5 in the morning, when the building is quiet and the decisions are sitting on your desk waiting, the distance between them feels like everything. Level 9, the core 68 years old, $48 billion. Presidents call you for advice. Your public statements move markets. Universities carry your name on buildings that will stand for centuries. You've funded medical research that changed the trajectory of diseases. 500,000 people have worked for you. You've given away more money than most countries spend in a year. And in many of the ways that matter most, you are completely alone. Your children are capable. You made sure of that across decades of deliberate parenting. But they live under the shadow of what you built, and that shadow is long. Your relationships with them are real and complicated in ways that are genuinely difficult to explain at a dinner table. You and your spouse have a system. She handles the public philanthropy, you handle the strategy. It's efficient. The conversations between you that aren't about work or family logistics or managing an image larger than either of you, those are increasingly rare. You are not a person anymore. You are an institution. Late at night, in the study overlooking the city, you think about the other version sometimes, the one where you stayed small. Dinner at the same table every night, no advanced team, no agenda, just proximity. The kind of closeness that only exists when there's nowhere else to be. But the honest answer, the one you'd never say out loud because there's no one left around you who would truly understand it, is that you would make the same choice again. Not because the trade was worth it, but because you were never the kind of person who could have made the other choice. The drive that built the empire and the drive that cost you the quieter life were never two separate things. They were always the same thing. The world will remember the institution. Only you know what it cost. Wealth at every level comes with a price. The only difference is what currency you pay it in.